The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a pale blue wash across the waiting room. Plastic chairs lined the walls like an assembly line, each one squeaking when occupied, each one too cold to be comfortable. Elijah sat alone in the farthest corner, his knees drawn in tight, holding a slim manila folder against his chest like it might breathe for him if he let go. His sneakers barely brushed the polished tile floor. One was frayed at the toe. The tag on his hoodie scratched his neck, but he didn't move. Across the room, separated by tension and tax brackets, sat Charles Ashcroft. Wealth followed him like a second skin, silver cufflinks, Italian leather shoes, and a Rolex that glinted every time he lifted his glass of mineral water. Cameras followed him too. Two of them flashed from behind a tall receptionist desk, capturing him mid-laugh as he shook hands with a local councilman. Elijah watched through. Narrowed eyes, not with envy, but with something older than his age. Skepticism. He hadn't wanted to come here. His mom had booked the appointment with the city's free clinic, but the system rerouted him to the new Ashcroft Urban Wellness Center, part of a flashy rollout for medically neglected communities. A nurse had apologized for the mistake, but said, "Since you're already here, we'll fit you in somehow." Charles turned his gaze toward Elijah, as if just noticing him. "What's this?" said loud enough to be heard. "They're letting middle schoolers diagnose themselves now." A few in the room chuckled nervously. Elijah didn't flinch. Charles stood and crossed the room. He walked slowly, limping from the illness that had kept him out of public view. For months, some kind of degenerative nerve condition, the media speculated. He crouched beside Elijah's chair with the grin of a man used to attention. "What's your name, son?" Elijah didn't answer. Charles smirked. "Not much of a talker, huh? All right, here's a deal for you." His voice dropped, tinged with mocking amusement. "Cure me, and I'll give you $1 million. Elijah looked up at him for the first time. His eyes didn't flicker, not with confusion, fear, or humor. Just silence and wavering. Ancient Charles shifted, uncomfortable. Tough crowd. Elijah didn't blink. He didn't touch him. But in that moment, something passed between them, quiet as breath, heavy as gravity. A nurse called from the hallway. "Elijah Price?" He rose, his thin frame barely disturbing the air around him, the folder still pressed to his chest. He walked toward the nurse without a word. Behind him, Charles rubbed his forearm, suddenly uneasy, though he didn't know why, as the hallway swallowed Elijah whole. The lights above him dimmed slightly just for a second, and Charles kept staring after him, frowning, as if something had shifted in the world and he'd missed the moment it happened. The hallway was colder than the waiting room, humming with the low murmur of voices behind frosted glass doors. Elijah followed the nurse to an exam room, but after a brief apology, "We're overbooked today. Sweetheart, might be a while." He was left alone again. The paper sheet on the exam table still crisp. He waited 5 minutes.
Ow.
Silence pressed on his ears like cotton. Elijah stood, slipping out into the corridor. No one stopped him. The clinic was glossy and new, but lifeless white walls, white coats, white noise. A cluster of voices drifted from a conference room near the east wing. Elijah edged closer, unseen behind a tall potted plant. One sneaker toeing the polished floor, Charles's voice rang out clear. He was laughing, not the friendly kind, but sharp-edged. "Listen, we pour money into this place, and suddenly we're saints," he scoffed. "They should be grateful to breathe near real medicine. Half of them think Tylenol is a cure-all." Laughter followed from 2 men in suits, one with a clinic badge half tucked behind his blazer. Elijah's chest tightened. His fingers dug into the manila folder until it crumpled. He didn't make a sound. He just listened until the laughter faded into indistinct murmurs, and he slipped away. Turning a corner, he nearly collided with a tall man in navy scrubs. "Whoa," the man said, steadying Elijah gently. "You lost?" Elijah stepped back. The man was older, maybe late 40s, with tired eyes and a calm voice. His badge read, "Dr. Nathan Simmons." "I'm Elijah," the boy murmured. Eyes on the floor, Dr. Simmons crouched slightly, leveling. His gaze, "You're not scheduled until later." "How'd you end up down here?" Elijah shrugged. Simmons studied him for a moment. He asked, voice gentler now. Elijah didn't answer, but the doctor noticed the bruise along Elijah's wrist. Purple and raw where the folder had slipped, wordlessly. Simmons pulled a Band-Aid from his coat pocket cartoon print, the kind clinics rarely stocked anymore, and handed it over. He didn't ask how it happened. Elijah took it, holding it in his palm like it might vanish. You ever seen walls this white? Simmons asked quietly, glancing around. That's on purpose. Easier to hide things in plain sight. Elijah looked up at him, eyes narrowing slightly. There was no smile, but there was understanding. Simmons stood, his tone shifting. They'll call you soon. If they don't, come back to my office. Room 304. As Elijah turned to go, Simmons added softly, Be careful who you let see you. The boy paused, then nodded. Back in the waiting room, the lights still flickered faintly. Charles was gone, but something hung in the air, heavy, sharp, like the sting of bleach trying to cover something rotten. And as Elijah sat again, folder bent in his lap, he wasn't just waiting for a doctor anymore. He was watching. A crowd had gathered by noon. Cameramen adjusted lenses while interns passed out brochures embossed with Croft Urban Wellness, restoring communities with compassion. Charles stood beneath a banner that stretched across the newly painted lobby. Flanked by city officials and smiling doctors, his posture was stiff, one leg braced against the podium to keep him upright. Behind the cameras, everyone knew he was sick, but no one ever asked how sick. Elijah sat in a far corner, watching from behind a column. His appointment had been delayed again, and no one had remembered to send him home. He didn't mind. He was used to being ignored. Bring one of the local kids up here, Charles barked at a staffer with a stage whisper. Just let them see we're connecting with the community. The woman scanned the room, eyes landing on Elijah like he was furniture. You, she called out, forcing a smile. Come up, sweetie. Elijah didn't move. Charles stepped forward, hand extended toward him. Don't be shy. Come on, champ. Let's show everyone how hope starts young. The cameras turned. Elijah stood slowly. He walked across the polished floor like he was walking through water measured, unblinking. The folder was still in his hands. The podium towered over him. Charles crouched slightly to offer an exaggerated handshake, grinning like a man running for something. Elijah just looked at him. Long enough that the audience chuckled, then shifted uncomfortably. Then he reached out. His small hand touched the inside of Charles's forearms just below the rolled-up cuff. A simple touch, bearskin to bearskin. Charles gasped. His whole body jolted. A flash of pain or something worse spread across his face. He stumbled backward, grabbing the podium. A tremor ran through his limbs. His legs gave way, and he crumpled to the floor, convulsing. Panic. Turn off the cameras. Someone yelled, but one didn't. A local reporter had kept recording phone gripped tight, eyes wide. Security rushed in. Elijah stood still as stone, expression unreadable. One guard pulled him away roughly. What the hell did you do? Elijah didn't resist. His hand hung at his side, fingers tingling faintly. Charles was breathing, sweating. His eyes fluttered. Open, wild, and disoriented. Get him away from me, he whispered. They dragged Elijah through the crowd. Past a sea of white coats and forced smiles now frozen into stunned silence. Outside, the afternoon sun felt blinding. A nurse caught up and whispered that Elijah's appointment would be rescheduled again. We'll call your mother. He didn't answer. He just stood on the steps, heart thudding quietly, hands still warm. That night, Charles Ashcroft stood, alone in his marble-floored penthouse, staring at his reflection in the mirror. No cane, no brace, no numbness in his right foot. He took a hesitant step forward, then another. By the third, he was walking normally, something he hadn't done in over 8 months. He collapsed onto the couch, shaking. His hands pressed to his face, not in joy but disbelief. His phone rang 3 missed calls from his private physician. He didn't answer. On his wrist, faint and fleeting. A small handprint shimmered like a bruise made of light, then faded, in the hallway of his memory. Charles saw Elijah's eyes again, steady, unafraid. Not magic, not coincidence, but something else, something that didn't want money, something that couldn't be owned. The footage went viral within hours. It wasn't the clinic's press team that released it, it was the shaky, raw phone video from the local reporter uploaded with the caption, "Boy touches Ashcroft, then this happens." Within a day, headlines churned across news outlets. Witch doctor in the waiting room. Croft collapse, miracle, or manipulation? Mystery boy's healing sparks controversy. They never used Elijah's name, but the images were clear enough. So were the dog whistles. By the third day, Charles Ashcroft filed a lawsuit, trespassing, public endangerment, unauthorized contact. The words clattered out of every press release like iron bars on a cell door. At home, Elijah sat on the worn couch in their two-bedroom apartment, staring at the muted television. His mother, Tamara Price, stood near the window with her arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight it made her temples throb. "Public endangerment?" she spat. "You didn't even touch that man hard enough to wake a napper." Tamara exhaled, pacing. "They don't even want the money, Eli. That's not what this is about." He looked up. "Then what?" She stopped. "Hour," she said flatly. "You touched him, and the world shifted. That scares people like Ashcroft." Later that week, a rock shattered their front window. A crumpled note came in the mail with no return address. "Keep your little freak away from decent folks." At school, Elijah's desk was moved to the far side of the room. Teachers avoided eye contact. Students whispered, laughed, or stared, like he was contagious. Someone called him Hex Boy in the hallway. He didn't flinch, just kept walking. Dr. Simmons came by one evening. He sat at the kitchen table with Tamara while Elijah lingered just out of view. "They'll crush you in court," Simmons said quietly. "Ashcroft's people are spinning this hard. They're painting it as stage, dangerous." "No resources, Tam," Tamara scoffed. "I've got a spine. And a son who didn't do a damn thing wrong." Simmons hesitated. "That's not always enough." She stared at him. "Then why are you here?" He folded his hands. "Because Elijah's not the first to be feared for something he didn't ask for. And he won't be the last." From the hallway, Elijah listened. Didn't feel powerful. He felt tired. But beneath the ache, something had begun to stir, a quiet defiance, a refusal to shrink for their comfort. On the news, Charles appeared. For the first time since the incident, walking unaided, he smiled tightly, claiming, "No child should be used for spectacle, especially when the stakes are public safety." The next morning, Elijah stepped outside to find his name spray-painted across the sidewalk in red. But he didn't look away. He stepped over it. The red spray paint on the sidewalk had barely faded before the first prayer circle formed. It started with Sister Lena, who lived 3 doors down and ran the corner food pantry. She didn't care about headlines. She cared about the way Elijah looked her in the eyes, steady like he knew things no child should. She lit a candle for him that Friday evening. By Sunday, church pews were full. Pastor Harmon took the pulpit with fire in his chest. "Don't tell me a miracle didn't happen in that building," he shouted. "Don't tell me God doesn't show up in places they call broken." Some said Elijah had the healing touch. One man on the radio insisted he was a fraud, planted to destabilize the health system. But in barbershops, laundromats, stoops, and subway cars, a deeper truth moved through the community. Elijah didn't ask to be seen. They forced him into the light, and now they can't look away. Charles Ashcroft did look dash constantly in the privacy of his study. He scrolled through Elijah's digital footprints, school records, old photos, a music recital clip where the boy played piano with haunting precision. There were no medical explanations for what had happened, but Charles knew it wasn't the touch that haunted him. It was the feeling in that brief, blinding moment he had felt something rip through him, foreign, an intimate pain that wasn't his, kind of inherited sorrow passed down like DNA. He felt the weight of eyes that had been followed in stores, mouths taught to smile even when disrespected, dreams shrunk to fit beneath ceilings no one else saw. It broke. Something opened inside him, and in the hollow space that followed, Charles saw another face. His son, Malik, adopted 17 years ago with good intentions. Then distanced when raising a black boy felt more like a political burden than a paternal call. He'd written checks to cover guilt, sent birthday cards with unsigned notes, never showed up when Malik marched. Now, Charles wondered, had his son ever looked at him the way Elijah had? He typed Malik's name into the search bar but didn't hit enter. His hand trembled over the mouse, the same hand that Elijah had touched. Outside his window, the city buzzed with noise and smoke. But somewhere just below it, another rhythm pulsed older. Deeper, it wasn't about miracles. It was about memory, and Charles couldn't outrun it anymore. The cameras returned before the dust had settled. Charles Ashcroft stood beneath the same banner where it had all begun, this time without a cane, without his entourage of polished PR handlers. A mic clipped to his collar trembled with his breath. I have decided. He began to withdraw the lawsuit against Tamra and Elijah Price, effective immediately. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. No apology followed, he continued. In the spirit of healing, the Ashcroft Foundation will commit $1 million to fund educational and health programs in Elijah's community. Flashbulbs erupted like a war zone. Porters shouted questions. Is this an admission of guilt? Did Elijah really heal you? Why now? Charles didn't answer. He just stepped aside, nodding toward the podium. What? The organizers hadn't planned for Elijah to speak, but Tamara stood next to him, her hand gently resting on his back. Elijah walked up alone. He looked out at the sea of lenses, his eyes in doubt. I don't want your guilt money, he said, voice steady, no stammer. No apology. Silence fell like a curtain. Then a wave of noise cheers, clapping, fists raised. What had been skepticism became something else entirely, solidarity. Later that evening, Dr. Simmons gathered the clinic staff in the break room. He placed a sealed envelope on the table. I won't be returning, he said calmly. I've spent too many years being a diversity checkbox in a system that wears compassion like a press badge. Some nodded, some looked away. I came to help people, he added. Not to clean up the messes rich men make while pretending to care. Outside the clinic, protest signs lined the sidewalks. Dignity, not donations. We are not experiments. Night. The knock on the door was soft but deliberate. Tamara answered it, arms crossed. Elijah stood behind her in the hallway, expression unreadable. Charles looked different. No suit, no smile. Just a man standing in the rain without an umbrella. I'm not here to fix anything, he said. I needed to come. Tamara studied him, then stepped aside without a word. He entered slowly. The apartment was modest, warm, filled with signs of a life built carefully over time. Charles looked around as if he didn't belong. He didn't? I felt something that day, he said, looking at Elijah. More than pain? More than healing? Elijah didn't speak. Charles's voice broke. I didn't know what it meant. Stepped forward. He healed you. But he's not here to fix your soul. Her words hung heavy in the air. Charles nodded, tears welling but unfallen. I know. He turned to leave, pausing once at the door. Elijah met his gaze and held it, still. Steady, still ancient. The clinic looked different now. Not just the paint brighter blues. Art from local youth hung proudly on the walls, but in its pulse. The waiting room wasn't quiet anymore. Laughter lived there. Names were called like greetings, not files. Elijah walked past the building slowly, hands in his coat pockets. He was taller now, older, his stride calm and deliberate. Behind the glass, he saw Dr. Simmons' white coat, clipboard, smile real this time. People shook his hand, not out of habit, but respect. In one corner, organizing flyers lined a bulletin board. Community Health Council, join us. Patient Rights Workshop this Saturday. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs now. A janitor mopped near the entrance. Elijah paused. It was Charles. No fanfare. No one pointed. He moved carefully, wiping the baseboards, nodding. Quietly at patients who passed, Elijah didn't wave. Didn't need to. Their eyes met for a second through the glass and it was enough. Voiceover. People kept asking what I did to him. They wanted a name for it, a label, something they could explain or fear. But it wasn't magic. It wasn't healing. It was truth. And the truth never fits clean in a headline. He kept walking, past the corner store, past Sister Lena's food pantry, where she waved from the porch, past the mural of him someone had painted on the side of the pharmacy, his face surrounded by stars, fists, open palms. But the image that stayed with people wasn't the mural. It was the clip from later that dequiet, unnoticed by most. A child sat on the clinic's steps, crying into her arms. No one saw what Elijah did. He knelt beside her, didn't speak, simply placed a hand on her shoulder and waited. She looked. Up, eyes red, lips trembling. He didn't promise to fix anything. He just stayed. That moment never trended. It wasn't broadcast, but it lived. In her, in him. In the way the world kept turning, slightly softer, slightly braver because of it. Voiceover. We keep waiting for miracles, but maybe what we need are people who don't look away, who touch and stay, even when it hurts, especially. When it does, the camera panned up to the sky, wide and pulsing with evening light, and the world scarred, finished, still flawed, breathed in and didn't look away.